Yeah, your hair looks so good. Dave Meltzer here with Office Hours. And I have Danielle Orsino here with me. Everyone knows her as the martial arts expert, but she's now an author. And look at those medals behind you. I love seeing
Yes,
this is so much better seeing people's real life behind them. How cool is that?
thank you.
Anyway, your book's coming out June 29th. I had to have you on Office Hours because it's National Fairy Day, as you told me.
Yes,
And
it is.
I always like to ask my first question of authors is what was the inspiration for the book?
That's such a good question. Thank you for having me first and foremost.
Sure.
It's very funny how this happened. I was actually a nurse, I'm an LPN, and this came from a patient who was going through very long IV treatments for Lyme disease. And he was dripping for almost 2 hours. He had completely redone his life, moved up to Westchester County from Pennsylvania, and he had been dripping for about 8 months at the time, every day, 7 days a week. And he then decided it was just time to go home for a little bit. So he would drive 5 hours, drip for two, turn around and go right back home. And so one day I had reworked my schedule and I was trying to keep him company. And he said, look, tell me a story. He's like, I just can't make it through these treatments anymore. And so I said, well, tell me something interesting. And he said, well, I was recruited by the CIA out of college. And I was like, wow, you could have been like secret agent man. And he said, no, it was the Trends and Intentions Division, the most boring, part of the CIA. And I'm like, we could have found out what was in Area 51, made a couple jokes. And I said, well, what else? And he kind of told me a little bit more. And I said, well, you know where Lyme comes from? And he goes, yeah, Plum Island. We discussed all the conspiracy theories. And all of a sudden I just said, no, the Fae. And he's like, what? And I said, yeah, it's their way of getting back at us for the way we treat the environment. And he looked at me and he's like, huh? And I said, you know the Fae? And I said, and out of my mouth,
world, David.
out of my mouth comes the Fae are angels that didn't get involved in the war between God and Lucifer. They were left over. They were locked out of heaven. And he just looked at me and he was like, what? And it just fell like out of my mouth. And he went, go on. And I said, you're a CIA agent. I said, you've been sent here to find out if the nurse is really the brains behind this whole Lyme operation here. And I just kind of made him part of the story. And he was like, well, tell me more about the Fae. And I said, well, they're behind the English monarchy and European monarchy. And I just crafted this story. And every day that he sat down to drip, I would stay late, or on the weekends I'd work. I'd tell him another piece and entertain him. And so the story just grew and grew. And by the end of it, I had this big story. And he said, Danny, you really have to write this down. And so I did.
I'm so excited to read it, is that my whole philosophy about teaching is about lessons and stories. And it's so interesting to me how the human mind works with stories. So, for example, I could give you a list of my favorite 10 lessons, and you'll forget them immediately. And I'll forget them. I forget my own lessons and life lessons, right? I teach gratitude, forgiveness, accountability, and effective communication. Every day I find myself not being gracious, not being forgiving, not being accountable, and I work on that. But the interesting thing about stories that is just fascinating to me, and I teach people this, is that we don't forget the story. So if I write down, be more interested than interesting, the story about my stepbrother, I remember the whole story about my stepbrother. Now, let me tell the story a little bit differently every time, which makes it more entertaining, and people like to hear the story more than once, which is also, I think, a terrific phenomenon about branding, is that when we're the speaker and the storyteller, we just assume that everyone gets the story the first time. They remember the story completely the way that we do the first time, and they never want to hear the story again. But the truth is, like, I've watched The Greatest Showman like 50 times on airplanes because I like the story. I'm an entrepreneur, right? And my wife thinks it's because I like the music. I actually like the story. It inspires me every time. When you were telling the story, you had no thought at all that, I'm going to write a book and maybe someday a movie off of this. But yet when he told you got to do something with this, you were able to recreate these stories. And I'm sure it's altered a little bit, but it's been fascinating to me that it all, like, because those are days and nights and weekends, but yet the fae and the character and the creations and the innuations, all these things are remembered by you. I think it's almost like you're just accessing the stories, that they're some sort of universe or truth to stories that we tell in these alternate places, which may be your next novel, by the way.
Once I got going and I really started writing, I joke that the fae actually knock on my brain at night, and the characters will knock on the brain and be like, excuse me, my turn. And I have one character in particular that's in book 3, and her name is Indiga, and she came in blasting Cherry Bomb and knocked on my brain at about 3 a.m. and was like, it's my turn. Get up and write. It's my turn now. Write my story. Had no intention of the character where she would fit in, but she came in blasting right across my head and was like, tell my story right now. I have a story. And it was like Eloise in the plaza. That's how she walked right across. And I could see her as clear as day walking right across and saying, this is my origin story. This is where you're going to go with it. Go right now. And it was just like a download of information. She appeared. And from there on, it was like, I'm not killing her off anytime soon. She's going to be part of this. But she came in with a theme song and just big indigo colored eyes. And she was this little troublemaker fae. And she had a nickname, Little Big Mouth, and just told me, this is my story. You're going to write it.
Tell me about the dragons.
My dragons were inspired by my dog, Carlos, specifically, who's a little Yorkie. It's a Yorkshire Terrier. I built if you're a fantasy novelist or fantasy reader, dragons all have a very specific look. We all know fire breathers, J.R.R. Tolkien, Game of Thrones. They all are just magical and it's accepted, or, it's just dragons fly. We all kind of go, yeah. I built my dragons from the inside out. I decided dragons breathe fire, but why? It's just accepted. So I started in their digestive system and built from their stomachs out. So I figured they're going to breathe fire, but why do they breathe fire? So I started with bacteria and built their stomachs and then went out from there. And so I built an acid breather, a fire breather, and an ice breather, but I built from their bacteria and then worked it from there, because I figured I didn't want to make them magical. There was no way these dragons were going to fly, breathe fire, acid, or ice, and just have it be magical. And that's my excuse. As a nurse and someone who enjoys science, I couldn't accept that answer because it seemed too easy.
And you went to the vet?
Went to my vet, showed it to him, and said, this is my idea for a fire breather. And he looked at me and he went, I'm sorry, what? And I was like, given, my things, he was kind of like, okay, now what are we doing today, Danielle? Showed it to him and he went, it's actually plausible. And I said, that's good enough. It's all I want is plausibility. And he went, it really is. And I had never seen Game of Thrones. I hadn't seen Reign of Fire, none of like the normal vernacular, things. And he went, that's actually plausible, Dave. So I did that. Then I went to my local community college, Westchester Community College, talked to the engineering students and said, I need to build a flying dragon. I don't want them the size of 747s. I want to base it on the albatross theory of thermodynamics and of thermals. I want them gliding. They cannot be huge. I have to get them off the ground. They have to be able to carry one fae, gave them the height and weight of a fae. They also looked at me like I was crazy, but it wound up being their midterm project. And my world had to be lived in and real. I was not going to be on Mythbusters and get busted. That's how I looked at this. Like, if I'm going to do this, I got to jump in. It's got to be real.
Well, in 2020, I am not going to be surprised if an ice-breathing dragon comes to my door and says, hello, you've met my queen, Danielle Orsino, and you need to buy her book on June 29th. So I would not put it past this year. What a great premise. I can't wait.
David, I don't mean to stop you. We actually shot a trailer. I produced the trailer. We shot on Memorial Weekend. It's in the editing stage, and we're putting the Beethoven music to it with our music director. I told Danielle that if the website's live, we have to get that trailer done by Fairy Day because she's the character. She's Queen Aurora, and wait till you see Jarvuk with his wings.
I didn't even know that she was the queen, but I inherently it came through me. So I have to get that trailer. I'm going to use it for my Friday trainings. I'm going to use that.
Awesome.
Before it starts, I always have something on there, whether it be Michael Jordan or Rudy. We might as well have the phase up there. This will be extraordinary, and I'll make that my trailer. Any last lesson that you learned in writing the book? Did you actually write it, or did you transcribe it with a recording? What was your biggest lesson that you learned?
I did. I actually hand wrote everything first and then typed it.
Oh wow!
I found that handwriting allowed it to flow a little easier, and then I could edit when I typed it. That was just my method. I'm not classically trained, so to be perfectly honest, I probably broke every rule of classic writing.
Which will make it great. That's what's going to make it great.
You know, I wrote 3 books at once. I jumped from book to book to book to book and kept doing that because I didn't know. You know, I think you have to break the wheel and break the box. And that's what I did. You know, I wrote this book. You know, I went out, got an agent, sent it to the major publishers. One of the boutique publishers liked the 3rd book and said, we're going to make you the next Twilight. So turn this into a teenage romance. Let's put it in an insane asylum and modern day it. And we swear this is the next Twilight. And I went, huh? I was like, no, it's the Fae. And no, thank you. And I just took the book and walked because I was like, what are they doing? The second one, I went to one of the big 3. They said, cut it in half, come back to us in 6 months and we'll talk and we want you. And I said, okay, but I need it released International Fairy Day. And they went, no, sweetie, it doesn't work like that. They went, no. We'll release it when we want to, after we've done our full market research, figured out exactly what, and they gave me this, and I looked at them and I went, no, it needs to go into, my gut just said International Fairy Day. And I walked away, which a lot of new authors would say, are you friggin' crazy? But I had a personal training client who said, Danielle, they're going to own you for 20 years. And he explained everything. And I went, I'm going to just roll this dice. And a friend of mine who had a small publishing company said, look, I only do nonfiction. She said, I'm going to roll the dice on you and I'm going to let you do a fiction book. She said, I'm going to publish it. She's like, this is totally outside our wheelhouse. It's Icon. She said, but I will put it under, and we made up a name, Fane Logic. And she said, go ahead. And I was like, okay. And I rolled the dice. Here we go. So the biggest thing I've learned rolling on this book is roll the dice on yourself, bet on yourself. That's the biggest thing is when you have that feeling, do it. I just got accepted into PA school when I had to make the choice on either go with the book or go into PA school. I had the acceptance letter in my hand and I called my father up and said, I took a picture of it and sent it to him and said, for the record, I got into medical school. And he looked at me, he goes, it does say med school. I said, okay, so I got in. He goes, yes, you did. I go, that is clear. I got into med school. I'm publishing a book, click. And I hung up. And that's all I just waited. He called me back. He goes, hon, we're gonna talk about this. I said, the school is $210,000 and I can't write it off. And I held the phone away. And he went, how much? I said, $210,000. He goes, yeah, so you're writing a book. Great. That's really good to hear from you, babe. Great. Yeah, do the book.
That's
and
so
I hung
good.
up and I was like, okay.
Gotta vote for what you want. Vote for what you want to come elected in love. I can't wait to read it. June 29th. Sold everywhere, I'm sure. Amazon, check it out. Just give me the name of the book one more time so I don't.
A copy of it for you, David. This is going to be your copy we're going to send you.
I'll read it before. I'll have to go live again, so that's amazing. So fun. Yeah, reminded me, vote for yourself. I'm going to end with this. You may not know this about me, but my mother, the nice Jewish mom that raised 6 kids by herself, she was a 3rd-degree black belt. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah, in the martial art of Jewish guilt.
Okay.
They all are.
Thank you both. I look forward to seeing you in person, and I can't wait to promote the book. It sounds awesome. I like anything that's been channeled because it's usually the truth. So
I'm going to send you. I'm going to send you a
Very
piece
much.
of our Gloves Off podcast of her with the Giants. Don't get her going on the Giants because you don't have that much time.
We'll have you guys back on. That's all right. I love you guys. Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Thanks, bud.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Take
Thank
care.
you.